You are listening to episode 62. On today's episode, I get to interview Charles Johnson Esquire, and he took part in the brunch pitch that was put on by Tajmir and Emma from our last episode. So today we get to hear about his business. He is creating wealth for the next generation of African Americans through the cannabis industry. And how? Well, he is the co-founder and CEO of Leaf Spots, Inc., an African-American B2B cannabis transportation and logistics software company. And so in this episode, we not only get to talk a bit about his take on social justice, but we actually get to learn a bit about the tech space as well. By the way, if you've been loving our episodes, be sure to follow me on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify. And if this has brought any value to you whatsoever, please let me know in a review or in the comments on the blog on my site. And I would love to hear from you and hear what we could even bring more to empower you as entrepreneurs, wantrepreneurs, and people just looking to be inspired to find their purpose. And on with the episode. You are listening to the sounds of inspiration. Welcome to the Okiki podcast, where we make inspirational people known. Brought to you by your host, Fian O'Brien. You are listening to the sounds of inspiration. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Okiki podcast. And today I get the opportunity to interview a special guest. His name is Charles Johnson Esquire, and he is the co-founder and CEO of Leaf Spots, Inc. And this is an African-American B2B cannabis transportation and logistics software company. They are also pursuing a Class 4 license in New Jersey. This is really interesting. So I get to interview a tech founder, and he is part of this series that we're doing, interviewing entrepreneurs who pitched their products during the brunch pitch. So thank you so much, Charles, for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
And do you mind letting us know and letting the audience know, Charles, how did you get into this space of doing logistics and software, and particularly in cannabis? Were you always wanting to be an entrepreneur? And what was your journey that led you here?
So it's interesting. I was speaking with my co-founder, Sally Stallings, about this back in 2018. It was something that I thought about years beforehand, because I think in college I was telling people that states and including the federal government were able to figure out how to tax cannabis, then it would be legalized, because there were so many parallels between prohibition, the alcohol prohibition piece. But yeah, I've always wanted to, but it just, kind of never panned out. So I think thanks to COVID and, having that lockdown, because I'm in New York City, kind of gave me a chance to really focus on my side project. So it started back in about 2018. Just organically, we were speaking about it. Then we were originally thinking about delivery, and I looped in one of my friends that's really our tech guy. So I'm technically the non-technical founder. I'm just the statutory legal guy. But connected with him, spoke with him about some things. He was very interested. And from there, him and I just started building out what we were planning on doing. And then the more that I really looked into it, because originally it was going to be 2019 that we were going to kind of focus in on it. Legislation in New York didn't pass, so it kind of was put on the back burner, but we were still, kind of speaking about it, making sure that this is something we wanted to do. And it kind of just kind of organically kind of grew into the distribution part, because the more I focused and really looked into the market, I realized that the supply chain piece and a growing upcoming market was going to be extremely important. So just that logistical infrastructure aspect that the industry was going to need So I felt like that was something that we would be able to contribute to. And also with cannabis, I realized that a lot of people have been arrested from it. I have, personal experiences with it from family, directly, vicariously. And I realized that this was an opportunity to get, the younger generation involved in the cannabis space, because I really believe that it touches the STEM subjects, particularly with us, with technology. So I just wanted to kind of expose that and to show, younger kids that, you can be a young Black person in this space. And you don't necessarily have to be owning a dispensary, but there's so many components to this industry. So that's really how it kind of started.
Yeah, that is a really fascinating journey and approach too, because I think we always think of this new industry, a fairly new industry, even in Canada as well, as just the actual product itself and not all the other pieces that come with it. So that is really fascinating. I know a while back with a nonprofit I volunteer with in my city for Black professionals, we had a lady present who actually had a cannabis store. Again, the actual process of being allowed to have that store was quite lengthy, even though it's now legalized. It was quite intense. And she kind of talked about that. It was really interesting. And so I just think the opportunities, like you said, to kind of redefine the narrative around it, especially for people of color who had, been criminalized through it or had really bad experiences, that this can now be a new opportunity to kind of create something new for themselves. So given, I guess, COVID and really that holding you back, how long has it been that you guys have actually been able to functionally operate as a company?
I mean, once we registered our business, that technically was the start of it. So, we're in that bootstrap stage, raising capital during the seed funding rounds, getting our prototype together. But it was interesting. I think that because we were tied into the technology component, we were able to just kind of utilize, Zooms, Google Meets, all the various things, because in New York, as you know, we were one of the first places to get on the actual lockdown. So, I mean, there was, I felt like I intimately knew my apartment so well here during that time period, though. But it's been interesting. We just, like I said, with the considerations of COVID, just being mindful with travel, those things have always kept in mind. But I really believe just as a country, or really just as a world, we've, utilized the Zoom aspects and being able to meet with municipalities and other professionals via Zoom, conference calls, just trying to maneuver through it while also staying safe.
Yeah, for sure. And another question I wanted to ask too is, I know you talk a lot about logistics and transportation with your software. So is it mainly focused, I guess, in New Jersey and New York in terms of logistics? Because I don't know how mobility has been for the States in terms of this season, but I know in Canada for a long time, a lot of people weren't allowed to just randomly cross the borders to other provinces like that. So yeah, just curious about that function and that piece of your business as well. How did that affect you?
That was a great question. So right now the beauty of it is that New York, just recently legalized, New Jersey recently legalized, and they're actually gearing up for the application. So legally, we can't, transport anything until we get licensed by the state. So this has just been an opportunity to really build up the software platform and just connect with various networks. But it's been interesting. I think here in the States, though, we expect, the neighboring states, because it's the tri-state area, to enter into the New Jersey market, because that's where we're primarily focused on right now, because that's the most evolved. But it hasn't necessarily affected per se, because legally we can't transport anything anyway. And also, too, outside of just the logistics portion of it, the cultivators, dispensaries, none of those things are just actually operating yet. So we're gearing up for that piece and for the actual market to open, because I think we're anticipating the market to open first quarter next year.
That's a good point. So you're planning for like the legal aspects of being able to do this as well as the logistics. And so I guess, like you said, in this downtime, you've had more of a time to actually focus on developing the software. So what has that process been for you? And was that involved with like market testing or like surveys with the potential customers? What has been that process to help you build something, anticipating that the doors will be open for you to use it?
Yeah, it's been a combination of all those that you mentioned. To be honest, it's really been a combination of all those pieces, because again, we know that we're walking a very thin line, because we can't necessarily transport anything, but just trying to, like I said, identify that minimal viable market aspect of it, and the market validation piece has really just kind of been our focus over. Just as far as the building out parts, I'm just very thankful that, our CTO has that technical piece, because he's been able to fill in a lot of those gaps. and I kind of try to leave it over. I really am totally against micromanaging as far as just being a leader for my company. But yeah, that's to kind of answer your question. It's been a kind of push and pull type of situation though, but it's been a combination of all those.
For sure. And I know you kind of touched on it before, but I noticed that you have a background being an attorney, and the other lady that I mentioned before, her background's in law too. So I found it very interesting that you're both in this space. Was it kind of informed by your knowledge of kind of social knowledge of social events around this legally that really kind of sparked your interest to join such an industry?
Yeah, it's a combination of that and then just also just the civil rights components too. So I clerked at the EEOC headquarters. So I've always been an advocate for just the civil rights components, especially when it came to employment. I do believe, and I've noticed this as well, that there's a lot of attorneys in the space. I believe that a lot of our skills have been transferable because, we digest statutory law. It's like it's nothing. Like I wear glasses now because of law school. But so I think that's been helpful as far as just being able to understand the legislation, break down legislation, see what parts, that we need to be in compliance with. But from just a social equity component, because I'm also a member of the NAACP, and just I know our efforts to, to really try to change that narrative when it comes to the war on drugs. That's really one of the bigger parts. And then, truth be told, seeing some of these young brothers that live out here that have great business acumen, but just don't have the access to like the structure when it comes to just forming business entities and things of that nature. Those are the other parts, because I feel like as a millennial, it's our duty to kind of give back or give forward to make sure that we kind of set up the platform for the next generation. So that's really where it comes from, just having those experiences, seeing it firsthand, seeing it how it's impacted communities, from Jersey to New York City. And it's not just here, just in the tri-state area. It's really just, nationwide, where how it's really just destroyed communities and families. That's where the major motivation is. But I do believe that having that legal background has helped tremendously when it comes to just understanding how this is going to be extremely highly regulated market and how we have to comply with, statutory law, as well as guidelines that are provided by the commissions.
Thank you for that. And yeah, it sounds like it worked hand in hand in terms of this, because I know from both sides, I heard there was just so many layers to, like, even though it's legal, even though you can start a store, there's just such a process. And then understanding like you can do this, but not that. And like,
absolutely,
the average person might be like overwhelmed by like how
no,
technical this actually is.
Very technical. And I think that's one of the things that I've learned as an entrepreneur, how much work it is. Because, you hear a lot of people talk about like, promoting the entrepreneurial space and things of that nature, but it's a lot. And then when you're dealing with like I said, a market that's going to be extremely regulated, it's like, oh, there's rules that you have to abide by. It's a lot of things that you have to make sure that you have in place to make sure that you're compliant. So I know like historically, in the medicinal aspects of it, there's a lot of what we call vertical licenses to where you can be a cultivator, have a dispensary, have a manufacturing, like all these various layers under one umbrella. But now I'm seeing with the recreational piece, it's not necessarily the case. And I do think that's a good thing because it restricts a lot of the larger players in the cannabis space to, just kind of overtake the whole thing. And if the purpose of the legislation in New Jersey and New York is to really focus on, social equity and to, get these participants, minority participants in this market that has been demonized for the past few decades, then it makes sense. But it's definitely a lot of work and a lot of layers, a lot of reading, and then just understanding. And even every day I'm learning something, so that's the beauty of it too. So positive is I'm learning something every day, but yeah, it's just making sure that you're in compliance and preparing to be in compliance, because you can get a license with anything, liquor, anything, and you can get it taken away because you're not in regulatory compliance.
Yeah, super important. And yeah, thanks for laying that out for the audience, just to understand. I'm sure for the listeners trying to hear like, okay, what is it like to actually be in this industry though? Because I know a lot of people might think, oh, I'll just start something here. And there's just so many components to it. I wanted to ask too, in light of the tech space, your development of the tech itself, all the research involved, what led you to the brunch pitch? And is this the only pitch that you've ever taken part in?
Oh, no. So Tasmir and I, we go back a little bit from, like I said, she, with her DM firm, she's done some stuff in the community. I'm heavily involved in the community up here, especially particularly in Harlem. So I'm always trying to support those endeavors and those ventures. But Yeah, she reached out to me on it. And to answer the other part of your question, I've done quite a few pitch decks because, again, as you're raising capital and things of that nature, the other parts they don't tell you about entrepreneurship is like you're always constantly raising funds. So I've had to, tweak pitch decks, business plans, executive summaries, things of that nature. Because I realized that every time you do it, you're learning and you're getting better. So there's always something to improve on. But yeah, that wasn't my first pitch deck. I mean, I've done quite a few. I have quite a few under the notch though, but with the brunch pitch, it was definitely a great opportunity to showcase Black businesses because I think that that's something that's underserved collectively in all market segments. So when they, reached out to me about it, she was on my tail about it because she knows that I was getting all these things in order, but I had to make sure that I would participate. And I was so glad that I did because I got, valuable feedback and it's opened the doors for a lot of other things.
That's awesome. It is really showcasing individuals from the Black community that have very interesting businesses. So it's been very cool, even on my end, to be able to connect with some of these entrepreneurs from the brunch pitch and hear what they're up to. And I guess my second last question for you is, if someone wanted to enter the tech space, whether it be in the cannabis industry itself or just in general, from your community, what would be the advice that you give them to get that kickstart?
The advice that I would give is to do the research. First, find out, do the research, identify exactly what the problem you're trying to address, because that's what all of us entrepreneurs are essentially doing. We're finding a problem that we feel like we can address and to help, a particular industry or to help people, because so for instance, we're focused on business to business, connecting that relationship, but there's also, business to client, B2C. So really just doing research, checking out other people in the space to necessarily kind of get an idea of what you're trying to do. And also the bigger thing too is to connect with the technical founder, or a technical person on your founding team. Because if you already know how to code and things of that nature, that's great. Like I feel like I'm tech savvy, but those nuanced things, you definitely want to try to, bring somebody on with that technical experience because it just makes things so much easier. But first things first is really just doing research and really trying to identify the problem and the solution that you're trying to address.
Yeah, really, really great advice. Thanks for sharing that. And finally, what do you value the most about the position you're in today with your business?
I think what I value the most is just knowing the fact that I'm going to be able to help a lot of people out and also create, jobs within our community, Black jobs, and getting people exposed to, like I said, the STEM subjects. Because another thing that's tied into with New Jersey, for instance, and New York as well, but mainly right now with Jersey, is that, you have to also build out what's called a social equity plan or social impact plan to how you're going to help contribute to rebuilding these communities. I know one of the things that we're focused on is really just helping the youth and identifying the opportunities within STEM. And then with the tech portion as well, just coding, things of that nature. So I think that's the biggest thing for me is to know that, this is a lot of work, but I know that at the end of the day, I'm going to be able to provide jobs for the Black community, and that's economic empowerment, which is, I think, one of the things that Dr. King talked about in the whole civil rights movement. We had to shift towards economic empowerment. And I think that this is just a way to help contribute. So that's really the biggest thing for me is knowing that I'm going to be able to help do that and just build. And then the second thing, I guess it would be like a sub thing, is just knowing that I'm able to build something that, that I created, was an integral part of creating. It's like it's your baby because it comes from inception and you're starting to see it go into fruition. Those are the two biggest things.
Thank you so much for sharing that and sharing so much value for business owners, for entrepreneurs, people even considering the tech space. It's definitely an adventure.
Yes, it is.
So
yes, it is.
Definitely to know what you're getting yourself into, or at least try and have a hint before you start. Thank you so much, Charles, for being on the Okiki podcast and for sharing. And if the audience wants to find you, where can they find you?
You guys can find us on LinkedIn, Leaf Spots Incorporated, LEAFSPOTZ, Leaf Spot with a Z. Also on Instagram, but so Instagram's kind of weird too, because they've been low-key hating on cannabis businesses. So like we've gotten blocked a couple of times. So that's one. But yeah, that LinkedIn is really one of the best options though. And also too, we have our website, www.leafspots.com. And if there's any questions or anything, you can always also shoot us an email at info@leafspots.com.
Thanks so
and
much
one other
again.
thing I was going to add
Oh,
too,
yeah.
because now you have me thinking about it, as far as one of the other reasons why, like, your last question, I think
Mhm.
it's also just being able to be an example when it comes to the fact that there's less than 2% of like CEOs in the cannabis space are Black. So
Mm.
it's crazy how we were arrested at like over a 90% rate. But when you talk about market participation, we represent less than, 3%. So just being able to
Mm.
show, like I said, the younger folks that, hey, we can be in this space and really trying to increase our inclusion. That's the other part that really motivates me as well, because it's crazy that it's only, literally less than 2% of Black CEOs in cannabis.
That definitely parallels with the other speaker that I spoke to as well. I might have to connect you two together,
Well,
even though
please
it's
do.
different countries, but it really did parallel. It was very strange reality for sure, how things
Yeah.
flip. Definitely. No, thank you so much again, Charles, and thank you for contributing to the Okiki podcast today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.